Welcome, friendly viewers, to Browns Bay, a humble suburb of Auckland tucked between two headlands of the East Coast bays, about half an hour from Auckland Central. Well, there's 8 of them. You've got Long Bay, Tor Bay, Browns Bay, Rothsay, Mairangi, Murrays, Campbells and Castor Bays. Say that 10 times faster. So why Browns Bay, you ask? Well, you probably know Browns Bay as a quaint, boutiquey little seaside village, but its history is vibrant, albeit young. With 140 years of colonial history, it's an accelerated example of early New Zealand settlement. Fear not, this is not going to be a history lesson. We're going to take a look at Browns Bay today, and then take a glimpse back into the past to see how it's changed. Some of it might surprise you. And what better way to start than with a countdown? No, not this type of countdown. Countdown Supermarket, one of the 2 main supermarkets in town. Countdown is located on the first inhabited site of Browns Bay, the Brown family homestead, built in 1876. As a farming family from Mount Albert, the Browns cultivated a lot of the surrounding land and eventually opened a guest house. Unfortunately, later down the track in the early 1920s, the Brown family homestead and guest house burnt down under different ownership. Not long after, the land was redeveloped as a campsite for holiday makers and summer visitors. Browns Bay Beach, the main attraction. During the summer, people flock here to find themselves an unreserved patch of sand to soak up the sun in between swims. Browns Bay had a wharf between 1880 and 1936. It was built for trade and tourism because ship and ferry transport was once the most efficient way of getting to and from the bay. However, due to the shallows at low tide, lifeboats of passengers were sent from ships. When they were close enough, men were expected to roll up their trousers and carry the women ashore. The wharf was severely damaged in a storm that struck the bays in 1936 and was eventually, perhaps reluctantly, demolished. The social hub of Browns Bay, catering to all ages, for the toddlers a playground, for the youth a skate park, and for everyone else the streets are lined with cafes, restaurants, bars and apartments. The reserve itself is now beautifully landscaped with native pohutukawas. So it's difficult to imagine that during the 30s this place used to be a residential paradise of thatches and holiday homes. But not for long though, because during the 60s the council started buying them up in order to provide locals with the seafront reserve we have here now. The skate park used to be a flat skating rink. Remember roller skates? They were all the rage back in the day. On the corner of Anzac and Beach Road is Speaker's Corner, a bustling British pub, entertaining with food, live music, events and of course the occasional pint of Guinness or Kilkenny. These days it's where patrons go to discuss gossip, local news and quite frankly have a whale of a time. News was shared a little differently almost 60 years earlier. The building was once a local paper press for the Bay's News, a free fortnightly paper that started rolling off the belt in 1960. It did alright for about a decade, until its competition, the North Shore Times, knocked it out of the picture. The end of the Esplanade is home to the local law enforcers. Back in the day there was a considerable amount of rebellious freedom in Browns Bay, given that the long arm of the law would only reach out on weekends and holidays, when Constable Maloney from Takapuna would pop out for a visit. This is the 3rd police building on the same site. First one being built in the mid-1940s, this one only being built in 1992. Placed on Anzac Day in 1968, the Stone of Remembrance was dedicated to Reverend M. Walsh. The Navy provided a guard of honour to look on as the stone was placed. The stone is appropriately placed beneath the iconic Norfolk pines, which are now about 80 years old. Anzac Day 2018 will mark the 50th anniversary of the stone's placement. Village Green is another beautifully landscaped park, a short walk from Browns Bay town centre. Back in 1916, this entire area was subdivided into residential sites, but flash forward 50 years and more recreational services were required. So once again the council started buying up and redeveloping the land to make way for the recreational services we have here today. A recreational hall, a library, the Old Folks Association club rooms, and a water feature. while I was filming here earlier, a hedgehog decided to take a swim. Hedgehogs don't do very well in water, and he didn't look like he was doing very well, so I took him home to see if he would get better. He didn't get better, so I googled how to look after a hedgehog, which took me to Hedgehog Hospital. We called him Ian, after Ian Thorpe, the swimmer, and after only 3 days at Hedgehog Hospital, he was ready to get back to business as usual. Catch you later, buddy. The RSA, or Return Services Association, have been around in Browns Bay since the 20s, when their meetings were held in the 555 Theatre. The first RSA hall was built in 1951, and it had a good run, but it was demolished and upgraded in the mid-90s to the two-story one we see here today. The original hall was built with high windows so that it was private enough for the Freemasons who rented it out for some of their secretive meetings. Freyberg Park was opened to the public in 1946 by Browns Bay Progressive and Ratepayers Association, who bought it specifically to use it as sports fields. It was named after Bernard Freyberg, who was Governor General and leader of the New Zealand Armed Forces during World War II. These days you'll find all kinds of sports being played, such as tennis, bowls, rugby league and cricket, just to name a few. The park was gifted to the Crown in 1952, and as far as I'm aware, it still belongs to dear old Queenie. Further up the road is Sherwood Reserve, which was developed 30 years after Freyberg during the 70s, when the surrounding area was being subdivided for residential use. The waterways and streams that run through Sherwood Reserve are home to eels, fish and frogs, and possibly even hedgehogs of the swimming variety.